honor to chair an event organized by the Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy and of the Athens office of the Hanns-Seidel Foundation. This is an online internet discussion with the title Evaluating the New European Pact for Migration and Asylum. We have the honor to have with us two persons who are dealing politically with the pact. So from the Greek side, we have Mr. Koumoutsakos, who is Deputy Minister for Migration and Asylum in Greece. Mr. Koumoutsakos, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And Mr. Stephan, Deputy Minister of Interior from Germany. Minister, good afternoon also. Nice to have you back and meet you after some time. And we also have four very good analysts on migration and asylum. Angeliki Dimitriadi, who is a senior fellow in the migration program in ELIAMEP. Good afternoon. Mrs. Marie de Zomer, who is the head of the program for European migration and senior fellow in the European Policy Center in Brussels. Mrs. Ashley Selino-Kiai, who is a senior fellow in the Istituto Affari Internazionali IAI in Rome, and Mr. Martin Wagner, who works for the International Center for Migration Policy and Development based in Vienna. So I would like to welcome you all. And without further ado, I would like first to give the floor to Mr. George Koumoutsakos from Athens, so that he can make us a short introduction. I would like to set some ground rules. The ministers will have 5, maximum 7 minutes to make your initial introductions. Then I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and then we're going to pass to the analysts. We're all going to be together during all the time of this event. And then we're going to I'm going to ask questions to you all, and then we can possibly receive some questions from the people who are following us. So, Mr. Koumoutsakos, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Athanasopoulos. First of all, let me thank very much the Hanns-Seidel-Stiftung and ELIAMEP for organizing, for hosting this video conference, which is a very timely event on a very crucial issue, like the migration challenge and the European policy on migration and asylum are. So let me just start by sharing with you our thoughts and our first reaction on the proposal tabled by the Commission on a new European migration and asylum policy. The initiative of the Commission for a new European Migration and Asylum Pact has been much anticipated. And we recognize that a lot of effort has been put into this complex endeavor since the Commission, following a series of intensive consultations, tried to converge several different views. All the texts that were presented by the Commission currently are under consideration by the relevant authorities in Athens, since it is a multidimensional issue. That means that not only the Ministry of Migration and Asylum, but the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Civil Protection of Citizens and Maritime Affairs are involved in debating, analyzing, and preparing the official positions of the Greek government. So we have established an interministerial working group in our ministry, in the Ministry of Asylum, Migration and Asylum, to follow the negotiations which will be soon start, and which we anticipate that there will be long, complex and difficult negotiations. So Greece has already contributed to the preparatory discussions with non-papers on a series of topics like the returns policy, fighting against smuggling, and the challenges of the Eastern Mediterranean migration route. In the same spirit, we are actively present in all discussions with our European partners, committed to contribute constructively in this rather complex discussion. We are anticipating, as I already mentioned, intensive negotiations aiming at achieving a fair, viable, and reliable common European system. we have been always maintaining that the obligations of a member state, firstly, to provide appropriate reception conditions for the applicants, secondly, to ensure the necessary examination procedures, and thirdly, to effectively return rejected applicants to third countries, should take into account both the size and the capacities of this country. As a frontline member state, Greece has been consistently calling for effective and concrete solidarity. A solidarity that would alleviate the burden we have been facing for years now in protecting the European external borders, while receiving at the same time a large number of refugees and migrants. In this regard, we must reach a better balance between responsibility of first entry member states and mandatory solidarity among all member states, including mainly through relocation of asylum seekers. Nonetheless, what we observe at the first reading of the text of the Commission's proposal is that extensive and mostly mandatory border procedures, in conjunction with the obligation to guarantee a fair process of asylum requests at the borders, are meant to place permanently a disproportionate and cumbersome burden on first entry member states. Large number of third country nationals would risk to be stranded for a long time under clear confinement conditions at the external borders before being returned, whenever and if this would be possible, even through the return sponsorship element that has been initiated by the Commission in its proposal. On the other hand, solidarity, as outlined in the text, seems to be assessed and applied differently, depending on the circumstances, in form of lengthy and complex procedures, and based on a number of not necessarily relevant, neither objective criteria. We welcome the fact that a system of managing situation of crisis or force majeure situations is foreseen in the Pact, but even there, we observe a lack of effective solidarity components. Another crucial factor, and I'm concluding in 1 minute, another crucial factor is our policy in returns. We gladly notice the effort to move to the direction of establishing a meaningful common European returns mechanism with a reinforced role of Frontex. We have in parallel to focus more on creating leverages for effective cooperation with our international partners, adopting the approach of more for more and less for less. That means more economic or political assistance for more returns, or less of assistance for less returns. We do believe that we need a clear and consistent system of incentives and counter-incentives towards third countries, as we cannot rely only on their goodwill. That means as well, this includes as well the possibility of extending the system of the bilateral agreements of relocation, not relocation, I will come back to it. The agreements that we have now with third countries on, sorry?
Resettlement.
Resettlement, yes. Moreover, and this is my final comment, we need to make sure that the third countries assume their share of responsibility, which brings me to make a very short, a very brief comment regarding Turkey. In particular, in the case of Turkey, which is host large number of migrants receiving in exchange substantial financial assistance from the EU, we expect that it fully and consistently implements the provisions of the 2016 joint statement, which at a certain point would surely need to be revised, because for the time being, it is not implemented, and the responsibility lies with Turkey just to give you an information, since last March, when we had the events, the dramatic events in Evros, in our northern borders, Turkey refuses to accept any return. They don't accept returns from Greece, despite the fact that we have now a number of more than 200 people to be returned. The Turkish authorities do not reply to our requests. So all in all, this is my first brief remarks. I try to touch upon the crucial issues and the crucial elements of the Commission's proposal. And of course, I'm waiting for a very substantial and interesting discussion among persons who are very knowledgeable about this very complex issue, which is a challenge and will remain a challenge for Europe for the years to come. Thank you.
Minister, thank you very much for also respecting the time frame. Now I'm giving the floor to Mr. Mayer. Minister, the floor is yours for your intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Mr. Athanasopoulos, dear Mr. Koumoutsakos, dear Deputy Minister, dear ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I want to provide thanks to the Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy and to the Hanns-Seidel-Stiftung, the Hanns-Seidel Foundation, for organizing and hosting this high-level conference. The Presidency welcomes the presentation of the new Pact on Migration and Asylum and the priorities set by the Commission. We want to use the remaining time of our Council presidency to push forward rapidly the negotiations of the Pact. We are willing to achieve a new and functioning European asylum system that is fit to meet future challenges based on humanity and order. At the Council meeting of the Ministers for Home Affairs on the 8th of October last week, Minister Horst Seehofer presented the envisaged agenda for Germany's Council presidency. The Member States showed their readiness to start negotiations about the Commission's proposals. We now started the work in the different Council bodies. In the extraordinary SCIFA meeting on the 13th of October, the Commission presented the Pact and answered questions of the Member States. Today, there is a meeting of the HLWG focusing on the external dimensions of the Pact. In the SCIFA meeting on the 21st and the 22nd and on the 30th of October, the German Council presidency intends an orientation debate on screening, pre-entry asylum and return procedures and solidarity. Further, there will be other SCIFA meetings in November in order to continue the orientation debate. Minister Seehofer announced that there will be an additional present Council meeting of the Home Affairs Ministers in the mid of November in order to have the possibility to conduct bilateral debates on the Pact. So our plan is that in the beginning of December, in the Council meeting on the 3rd and the 4th of December, it will hopefully possible to find consensus. I want to outline the 6 priorities of our presidency. The first aim is reaching an understanding on key elements of the European asylum system, like the screening, the pre-entry asylum and return procedures, solidarity. It was already mentioned by my colleague how important it is, and preventing abuse. The second goal is reaching an agreement to continue the negotiations on the regulation on the European Asylum Agency. The third goal is reaching an agreement on the Eurodac regulation. The fourth goal is starting the implementation of the Commission recommendation on an EU mechanism for preparedness and management of crisis related to migration, the Migration Preparedness and Crisis Blueprint. The fifth goal is restarting the negotiations on the Blue Card Directive and moving it rapidly forward. And the sixth goal is continuing the negotiations on the VIS regulation with a view to substantially concluding the file. Dear ladies and gentlemen, given the complexity and wide-ranging content of the new Pact on Migration and Asylum, the presidency considers a step-by-step approach necessary. We hope to achieve a political understanding on the key elements related to the asylum system step by step without losing sight of the larger context. This concerns in particular the three key elements. The first one is the pre-entry procedure. The second one is solidarity. And the third one is preventing secondary movements and abuse. We intend to hold an orientation debate on these three aspects at every level in line with the principle that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. We consider pre-entry procedures to be critical for the future system as they will help to reduce the numbers of persons not eligible for protection from entering the EU in the first place. However, we must ensure that countries at the EU's external borders are not overwhelmed and that they receive the necessary support from the EU and the member states, particularly in matters of returns. The presidency's aim is to reach a political understanding on these three key elements of the new asylum system at the Council, already mentioned, on the 3rd and the 4th of December, thereby providing irreversible police guidelines for the negotiations on the legislative texts in the following months, and especially in the Portuguese presidency. In parallel, we want to make significant progress towards a common database and improved operational support for member states. We want to take up the discussion in the Council on further developing the EU legal framework regarding legal migration as well. The presidency strongly welcomes the fact that the topic of returns is given special attention now in the reform package. I would regard this as one of the biggest advantages and progresses in the proposal. In this regard, we want to move forward with discussions on the operational implementation of the new Frontex mandate and to discuss the Commission's report on the leverage provided by Article 25A of the Visa Code as soon as the report is available. I want to conclude now. The presidency welcomes the fact that the Commission also considers the external dimension of migration to be important, because effective cooperation with third countries helps to protect the EU's internal asylum system from becoming overburdened. We have already actively addressed this topic with the Western Balkans initiative and by creating the operational platform for the Eastern Mediterranean route, along with the operational Mediterranean initiative with North African countries. And we intend to continue to push forward with these initiatives. The presidency will support the Commission and the High Representative in consolidating migration partnerships and dialogues and in anchoring migration as a cross-cutting issue in other policy areas. As I said in the beginning, we really appreciate very much this proposal of the Commission. Certainly it is not in total accordance to the proposals of the German federal government, but I am deeply convinced it is the best and the most substantial initiative we got from the EU Commission in the last years. And I would say there is really now a tremendous momentum to find at least this political understanding, as I mentioned, until the end of this year. I want to thank you very much for your attendance.
Mr. Maggi, thank you so much. Now, I also have a couple of questions from the people who are listening to us. Mr. Koumoutsakos, I've noted that you want to intervene, but because time is pressed, I will ask you specific things so you can actually answer what you want or say what you want during your.
I will be extremely brief regards the term that it slipped my mind the accurate term is readmission agreements with third countries, not resettlement. So I just wanted to clarify this in order to avoid any misunderstandings. So I was talking about a network of bilateral readmission agreements with third countries. Thank you.
Okay, noted. Thank you so much. So I have one question for each of you, and I would like to start with you, Mr. Meyer. You mentioned the correlation between the pre-screening process and the secondary movements. There is a sense that the main expectation that Germany has from the new Pact is somehow to reduce mainly secondary agreements, and that's why you are giving so much importance on the pre-screening process. Would you agree that this is your way of thinking, and because this is also what creates uneasiness to frontline states?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the pre-screening process certainly is one decisive pillar of this proposal. As Commissioner Johansson pointed out when she published the proposal on the 23rd of September, she said she underlined that only two-thirds of the applicants for asylum have no possibility to be accepted as refugees or asylum seekers. Only one-third who enters the European Union in the end gets the status of refugee or asylum seeker. So I think our common goal must be to prevent that the two-thirds who have no chance to be accepted don't enter the European Union. So in our eyes, this pre-screening process is very important. Firstly, we have to know who is about to enter the European Union. We must know more about their identity, about the things they have done before. Certainly, there must be a security and a health check done at this level. And certainly, I'm totally aware of the fact that especially the southern European countries are afraid that they are left with those who don't have the right to enter the European Union. So certainly, as I said, solidarity is a very important pillar of this proposal as well. And as I said, certainly as Germany is one of those countries who is the country of destiny, and most of the migrants want to travel to Austria, to the Netherlands, to France, and to Germany. So preventing secondary movement is also very important. As I said, there is no complete accordance of this proposal with the German federalist, the proposal of the federal government. In our eyes, it would be very suitable that we would implement the possibility that the migrants only receive social welfare funding in this country, which is the country they are sent to in the end. This is not now the content or within the content of this proposal, but this would be very suitable in our eyes as well. So Minister Seehofer last week had a call with, especially a video conference with the Home Affairs ministers of Greece, of Spain, of Italy, of Cyprus, and of Malta. And within this video conference, Minister Seehofer stressed very much that it is in Germany's interest that we don't overburden the southern European countries, and certainly it's especially in our interest as the presidency country that we find consensus, and consensus is only possible if the southern European countries, which are the countries of first entry or mostly of first entry, agree with this proposal. So we will do everything in order to find a consensus with the southern European countries.
Thank you so much. Mr. Koumoutsakos, I would like to ask you, Greece is a frontline, a first entry state, And one of the main goals of the Greek government is to push for a more efficient and more balanced solidarity architecture. But at the same time, there has been a lot of criticism about the quality of reception conditions in Greece. And I wonder how you're going to balance your request for more solidarity with proving that, also we are doing, we are taking care of our house as we should, and we won't see a repetition of what happened in Moria. How are you going to balance this in your negotiation?
Thank you for raising this issue. Regarding the situation in the camps in the islands, that we all know, we admit that it is far from being ideal. On the other hand, we should stress the fact that since the 1st January of this year, 2020, we have a more robust legal framework to address the asylum applications. And we manage now to be the second most productive asylum system in Europe after Germany's. And these are Eurobarometer's data that I'm giving you right now. So we have become very efficient in dealing with the asylum applications, which is a huge progress comparing to the past, what we had 1 year ago. And the fact that we reacted so efficiently in a very short time after the unfortunate events, after the arson of the Moria camp, shows that there is a new working culture in Greece, and in particular in this government. We are dealing in a better and a more efficient way with our responsibility regarding the borders and how we receive and deal with this huge challenge. And I would add as well that we definitely showed our efficiency in protecting not only national but European borders during the events of last March in Evros, and which gives me now the opportunity to say that Greece, within 6 months, faced 2 crises. The first in Evros in March, and the second very recently after the arson in Moria, both related to the fact that Greece is a frontline country, which shows what we have been said and asking for, more substantial and effective solidarity being implemented in a short time. So regarding the comments on the pre-screening, I just want to give a rather divergent reading, or a reading from a country which is much concerned about the pre-screening and the border procedures. The pre-screening includes health and vulnerability screening, identity check, security check, and registration. In itself, this process is rather long. It is rather long. It is provided in the Pact, in the Commission's plan, that this will last only 5 days. I have to tell you that I doubt it, if this is possible to be done within 5 days. And probably this exceeds the capacity of not only of Greece, but of all frontline member states. That's why we are concerned. And there is another point which is linked to the pre-screening procedure, which at least needs a clarification. And this is the fact that all the people arriving in our border, in order to, they get into the pre-screening procedure, but they are considered as not having entered the country, but a zone, sort of transit zone. It's a new element. But we believe that this needs to be clarified because we're talking about very sensitive border areas. So this is one of the points of the Commission proposals that needs to be clarified. Because as I told you, this is a very sensitive issue. You get into a member state's territory without this territory being considered as a member state territory. We need to have clarifications and probably to debate on this so that we all know where we stand. And since my colleague Stephan referred to SCIFA, to yesterday's meeting of SCIFA, my understanding is that almost 74 pages of questions for clarifications have been submitted by the member states. So, which shows that we have a lot of work to do, and we should do it in a very coherent and constructive way, otherwise we will be blocked. And this is something that Greece does not want. We do want the progress. We support presidency in its effort and its ambition to have a political understanding by the end of its mandate, of Germany's mandate. We will contribute to this, but having always in mind that the issues are very, very, very complex. So the faster we have clarifications, the better for the joint effort to reach at least a political understanding by the end of German presidency. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koumoutsakos. Now, I would like to give the floor slowly to our analysts, and I would like to ask you all a more general question, which is, I suppose you've read all these hundreds of pages of the new communications and directives and the working documents and all this. I would like each one of you, starting from our foreign analysts here. Sorry, Angeliki, I will leave you last because you are the host, so you don't mind, I hope. So I would like to ask you very briefly, starting from Marie de Zomer from Brussels, to give us your two main points, either all negative or positive or 1+1, on your new pact, your two first glimpses of what this new pact is, please.
Thank you very much. I'll make two connected points. I think the pact has some merit politically. I think the Commission has tried very hard to balance different kinds of considerations of different groups of member states. So I would give a positive point on that score. But as my second point, that would be the negative point. I have my doubts, and as also already came forward from the discussion we had so far about the implementation questions that the proposals raise, and the general operationalization. I see large problems there, and I don't think the pact sufficiently provides for extra mechanisms to strengthen the implementation.
Ashley, your turn on...
My 2 points. Well, I agree. The effort to reconcile diverging positions, I agree on that with Marie. A positive note I can make is the framing and the language in general, in terms of normalizing migration, in terms of an effort to go beyond the short-term ad hoc responses to a eternal sort of crisis situation, crisis modality, and to try to move beyond that and go towards more sustainable approaches to try to manage migration in its various dimensions as a normal phenomenon, while acknowledging fluctuations in arrivals and different situations like regular situations and crisis situations. That I would give as a positive point, but at the same time, coming to the solutions and I mean, it's very detailed, but again, I mean, as a bit of a negative point or like something to work on, I would say this normalization and making the policy work in a more sustainable, predictable way, and the solutions offered, there is a bit of a tension and maybe incompatibility, because then the solutions again focus mainly on which are all relevant parts of migration policy, but a little bit of too much of a focus on swiftness, speed of asylum procedures, borders is the main locality of the bulk of policy responses to be produced and to be implemented. And quite a lot of focus on returns, which is a complex issue, as all the ministers also agreed. So maybe my one positive, one negative point could be this.
Martin, your 2 points, positive, negative, depends on the mix from Vienna.
Yeah, thank you. It's difficult to pick one positive, one negative out of this. I think certainly a positive thing is for sure to look at migration as a whole issue in a more holistic way. I think it is certainly a direction, a good direction, to not look solely at asylum, because there are other processes in migration management that are linked to each other, and just thinking about legal migration on the one side, but also return, they are part of this whole migration management system. So this is, I think, a positive thing. I also see connected to this positive to have this focus on complementary pathways and hold us thinking more in the direction of legal pathways, how to arrange this in a concise way. Probably here a side remark, I find it it would have been good to look this also in a more package, because these parts are a bit aside and are to be determined later. And it was already said, if we look at this holistically, it would make sense to also discuss this upfront together in one. And beside, I need on the negative side, it is not really a negative side, but I think there's much room for clarification here in many issues. I think some if you read the whole document, you're not always clear how the different instruments fit together. And for me, it's one of the key questions, probably also whether this whole package approach will be proceeded like it was in the past, because this was also one of the main issues why it did not move on the past proposals, or whether this will be separated. This is something I was not really sure. There were different points raised that I heard.
Mm-hmm. So after finishing with the easy 1 + 1 or 2 + 0 positive negative questions, I would like to jump to some more specific questions, and I will follow the same line. But first, I would like to listen to Angeliki's 1 + 1 or whatever. I know that Angeliki usually has some heretic views, so I'm always willing to listen. So please.
I'm not sure they're that erratic in this company. I think we're quite in line. I struggle to find, to be honest, a lot of positive elements in the proposal that has been submitted. I think I'm going to agree with my colleagues that the intentions that have been underlying this new pact, this approach that the Commission has tried to build a consensus and sort of bridge the migration-friendly states, if you'd like, versus those that have been objecting for quite some time to issues like relocation and solidarity. This has been very positive. But for me, the key negative aspect that's coming out of this is this reinterpretation of what solidarity means at a European level. Because when I read the pact, I understand that now EU member states are united and they show solidarity as regards the returns of the rejected asylum seekers. So they don't show solidarity with each other towards something positive, like guaranteeing the right of asylum, facilitating access for protection, but they sort of stand united on returns, which is a little bit of a bizarre twist when it comes to solidarity. And I'm not sure that's what the core of Article 80 is about in the first place. I think there is more of a positive spin on it, and the courts have definitely given a more positive interpretation. And that concerns me.
Super. You've seen you're always a bit heretic. You always set some things down on the table. So I would like to go back to Marie, and I would like to ask you, we have heard this term efficient or effective and mandatory solidarity, and how it's going to be balanced with responsibility. So my question is, from what you know already about the pact, how effective and how mandatory does it look to you as a first view on this?
Well, how effective, I gave part of the answer there already away. I think there are quite a few issues with the implementation of the different ideas that the Commission proposes. And I would certainly say that that also goes for this new system of mandatory flexible solidarity, and particularly the core of that system, which is this idea of return sponsorship. I think there are a lot of things will need to be clarified still, as also mentioned by colleagues. Amongst others, questions and things that might not work very well relate to the question as to whether some of the countries that are likely to favor returns over, for instance, relocation, and I'm thinking typically about the Visegrad states who've always openly stated that they do not want to relocate people, they might not be best placed diplomatically, and a lot of people have said that already in Brussels, to contribute instead to returns. And then the question is, will they agree to transfer those people, as the current proposal puts forward, to really transfer those people to their territories if they haven't managed to return them, either within 8 months in situations of pressure or within 4 months in situations of crisis. I foresee that this might become a very tricky issue in the negotiations, but this is evidently only an outsider view. I wonder if this part of the return sponsorship aspect unravels, because member states cannot agree to the transfer of people that are not returned, whether then indeed the kind of solidarity that was aimed for with this new proposal, also vis-à-vis the Southern European states, will remain sufficient. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much. I will turn to Ashley, and I would like to ask you how do you think that this how do you think that returns could be associated with a more meaningful on a more meaningful interpretation of the external aspect of migration, and how do you think that we could connect returns with possible even readmission agreements, or with the offering of specific packages of maybe a more for more basis or a less for less basis for third states? How do you think that this could become more linear and more workable, more functional?
Okay, tough question, but I mean, I would say, first of all, I think also there is a bit of a, for instance, in the external dimension, the foreign policy part, the Pact in the communication, it is acknowledged, and it's important that it's acknowledged that return and readmission might be a politically sensitive issue for the countries that are readmitting these people. So this acknowledgement is good. But at the same time, how this sensitivity might be overcome, or how we can make this position, there is, especially when it comes to returns, there is a clear need on the side of the EU, clear priority to make this work. And on the other side, we have the less willingness issue. And it has been for some time that it was like, which kind of leverages we can try within the mobility sphere, let's say the visa, the short-term entry, mobility facilitation, etc. And then as it has been somehow proved that these are most of the time, either it is difficult to deliver on these promises, or it is not enough in certain cases of the third countries. There has been this idea of like, let's try to link this with other policy sectors and other policy issues. And this is in the sense, in terms of thinking about, okay, mutually beneficial partnerships, and let's try to understand what are the interests, where the interests of the third countries, our partners, lie, and try to have a mutually beneficial, balanced partnership there is a good idea. But at the same time, there is a bit of tension, and that tension will be there. And I don't have an answer at this point how to solve it, to be honest, is that the mutually beneficial, positively framed, balanced partnership idea, a comprehensive partnership idea, having trade issues inside, development issues inside, climate, energy, all these issues inside, and the return issue becoming the top priority somehow there, which is a bit of a sticky point there, let's say. That is a little bit a dilemma. And within the more for more, less for less, I mean, within the pact, what we see is that, and there's also another difficulty there, that it's not always the trade policy sector or the development policy sector and other policy sectors, they don't have necessarily the priority of convincing the third countries to admit, to readmit migrants. And that might not be there in line with their priority hierarchies, let's say. So there's the double challenge. Then within the pact, we see that there's an effort to try to use the mobility tools and leverage, sources of leverage, let's say, in a more effective way. Incentives, more positive incentives, more for more, negative incentives, less for less. In some cases, I mean, it might work. I mean, on the positive intent, I would always opt for positive incentive if possible, because I don't know if sticks would work in this case, because it's already an area of tension. And actually, it has the negative incentive. I don't know what my colleagues and the ministers think about it, but I am thinking actually reducing the options for people that from those countries that want to enter the EU through regular ways, to punish for the lack of their governments to readmit people that have entered irregularly. There is a little bit of a tension there also. So I would say, in general, I think what we have in the pact, the part on the using all the other policy tools, non-migration policy tools, it might be a good idea, but I think not making return the center of these partnerships would be also a good idea, in order to be in line with the framing of we want mutually beneficial and balanced partnerships. And second, within the mobility tools package, let's say, I think caution is needed in general in order to, in terms of seeing the results and how effective are and how constructive are using this more for more, less for less approaches in general.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And Martin, let me turn to you. I would like to ask you, what is your view about this newfound pre-screening procedure at the external border? If you think that this could work, or if you think that this will place indeed more burden on the first entry stage, and if you could also answer from your experience, connected to what I first asked you, what Mr. Koumoutsakos mentioned earlier about creating this gray zone at the borders of the first entry state, a zone which is actually part of the member state, but at the same time legally seems not to be a part of the member state. What's your observation on this interconnected issues? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Two, I think, quite essential questions also for me that I think that are quite crucial in the whole pact. As regards to the pre-screening, I mean, with the screening procedure, it is not completely. There are some member states that do such processes. Actually, in one way or the other, all member states do that. That they at first look who comes and then try to channel people into the respective procedures. This makes, of course, a lot of sense. But there's, of course, one crucial issue, and I think it was already mentioned, the 5 days is really short for quite a lot of things that are expected from this procedure. I'm just referring to the security check. I think such lasts quite long usually. But of course, also with determining whether somebody is a refugee or not, it requires also thorough processes. The country of origin has a certain indication, but also not necessarily. The pact refers here to a bit of one can think about these lines with 75% of recognition rates in the past versus countries with below 25% of recognition rates. This is a possibility to channel people, but it is a very delicate one, I think. But I would like to refer to one other thing with regard to the screening procedure, and this is something that I think was also mentioned already before. And I think there's one thing whether you manage, whether a country manages these processes in 5 days, but there's also another thing, what happens afterwards. And this must be clear, because otherwise I have to say in a bit a nasty wording, you have an inflow of people, but you have no outflow of people. And this brings me to the next point that you asked me. When we think about such transit zones, this is a very difficult situation. They are legally very difficult situation, and I think the responsibility, I think there's quite some court rulings here that make it quite clear that the country who is in whose sovereignty the person is, or under whose guidance the person is responsible. So I think the legislation and all human rights related issues apply to this situation. We have similar thoughts with international airports where there's quite a clear ruling from courts. But coming back to this point before, this outflow must be possible and must be there. Otherwise you have people stuck, you have people in limbo, and these people can neither go in front via relocation nor go back via return. I think this is one of the crucial points with this screening procedure, and something that really needs to more clarified here. We can't hear you.
Yes, I apologize. So, Agiriki, I want to come to you and come also a bit back to this external aspect of migration, because it's probably one of the most important things, because it concerns the outflow, as Martin just mentioned. And I know that maybe we should not focus so much to what happens with Turkey, but Turkey is a big problem, and of course Libya is a problem, and Africa is a problem. But with the EU-Turkey statement, we have maybe the more, let's say, detailed agreement we have on this. So, judging from the examples we have from there, and considering the fact from what Mr. Koumoutsakos said that the Turks do not accept anyone through any of the existing channels to go there, how do you think that this agreement and possible same agreements could be formed so that they are more workable, so that they can produce better results? What we could possibly do?
I think that the EU-Turkey statement is, it falls into the broader scope of the external dimension, but it's also unique because of the situation with Turkey. Regarding specifically the statement, and I heard the ministers saying before that it should be revised. I'm not personally sure that that's the direction we should be going, mostly because the statement hasn't been formed as planned from the beginning. One can hardly call it a successful deal. The original components of that agreement were that on the one hand, Turkey would reduce arrivals to Greece by preventing the outflow, to use the term Martin used, but at the same time it would accept returns. And Europe on its own end had a very specific bargain that was struck, that it would consider seriously visa liberalization for Turkish citizens. And then around the summer of 2016, with events in Turkey, this deal sort of falls apart, and neither side really works entirely as planned. And reductions had already started taking place even before the statement came into full effect. It was useful, but I'm not sure it was the catalyst. For me, the catalyst, and I don't know if my colleagues agree on this, was the closure of the Western Balkan route in reducing the numbers coming to Greece, and also the fact that 2015 was an outlier in comparison to previous years, and at some point we were going to return to normal average numbers. This is how migratory movement works. So I'm not sure we need to renew it. At the same time, the EU needs to continue supporting the millions of Syrians that are in Turkey. And that should be a priority. And I think it should also look to increase resettlement from Turkey. In other words, try to change a little bit the dependency and the relationship and how it's balanced right now, because right now it's imbalanced and a lot of the dependencies on the EU side and less on the Turkish side. So we need to sort of bring it up to par again, or shift the balance a little bit more on the EU side, and not also produce another statement that creates geographical containment on the island, with the results that we all know and have seen in the past couple of years. So a different mixture and less dependency. But overall, as regards the external dimension, precisely because it's important, and it's not just the EU-Turkey statement, we have the joint way forward with Afghanistan, which is now being renegotiated. We have, of course, Libya, which it will always be a country of focus. I think if you look at it from a broader perspective, it seems that no matter how important, the focus is always on migration management, which is very different from migration policy. And this is where, for me, the concern comes in. Rather than trying to create regional, national, local level policies that boost and allow for the formulation of a migration policy that is on the basis of a win-win with the third countries, the orientation from the European Commission and the member states is on migration management. And the key component of migration management is border management, essentially, capacity building and border management. And these are the two elements that are funded through the different facilities, the EU Trust Fund for Africa, etc. And these are the priorities. And it's a vicious circle, because we do it again and again and again, and it doesn't tend to produce the results that the EU would like, which is reduction of movement, or facilitate readmission agreements, for example, and the acceptance of returnees to the countries of origin.
Thanks so much. Now, I have a very interesting question from the people who are following us, which is provocative enough, and I will direct it to you. But I would also like, after your answers, the answers of the two ministers. So, someone asks if extraterritorial processing of asylum applications could be a solution in providing access to those who need safety in the EU. To me, it sounds really provocative, but I would like your answers. Now, I will follow the same route. So I will start from Marie. If it's something that you think that under certain circumstances could be used as a solution, or it's out of the question.
Thank you. It's not too provocative to the extent that it has been an idea that's actually there since the 1990s, this idea of extraterritorializing asylum processing. But in that observation already lies the answer to whether it's possible. No, we've been trying, or so many politicians have been trying for so long, but it's really near impossible to find really the location for doing so, to make sure that all the legal requirements and guarantees are in place, and so on and so forth. I'm happy to delve deeper, but I know we want answers of everyone, so I'll just very briefly keep it to, it's been discussed for a long time, we haven't managed yet, and for a lot of operational and legal issues, in my view, it's not a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Ashley?
I agree with what Marie says, and yes, exactly, it is extraterritorial processing is something that is kept in a little box, which is thought to be a magic box. And then every now and then it just pops up in a different name, which recently, I think it was 3 years ago, maybe it was the disembarkation platform's idea with the North African countries, which all of them immediately rejected, understandably. So in addition to the legal and operational complexities and difficulties in terms of appeal, in terms of many issues, I would also say there are political issues there, obstacles to this idea. Which is the unwillingness of the countries that you want to use their territories to do this processing, which I think should be understandable, because if it was exactly the opposite and Tunisia was asking Italy, for example, to process the asylum seekers entering Tunisia to assess their claims in Italy, I don't think that would be an acceptable demand. So I also don't see it as a viable solution.
Martin, I don't think I'm going to be surprised, but I just have to
No, there's not really much to add to this. I think, as it was said, I mean, it's persistently coming back into the discussions. But just for my point, one issue, I'm not sure and don't think that this transit zone that is now in the Pact is meant as extraterritorial processing. I think this is a bit a different meant, and just not to confuse the terms. I think what was meant here, and this is at least for me not clear. I think it is more close to the external countries of external borders of the European Union, and in some way close to them. So I think what we speak now is a bit something different. What was a discussion now, I think it is not on the table at the moment, as far as I understand.
Angeliki, you have the...
I mean, I agree with what's been said. I don't think there's anything to add, but I would like to hear, because what Martin mentioned is something that also struck me. I would like to hear if the ministers have an understanding that they can offer of how they see these transit zones actually working. I mean, where would they be situated? I mean, when this was put on paper, what was the vision behind them? Because it's also not clear to me. I understand what Martin is saying. This cannot be extraterritorial processing, obviously, for a myriad of reasons. But at the same time, it sort of has the feel to it, to an extent, when you hear transit zone outside the territory of the state. And somewhere in the Pact, it actually says that until the screening is done, technically, they're not part of the territory of the EU. So whose territory are they part of? That's not entirely clear.
Sure. So, and also thank you for making my life easier, because I was thinking how to phrase that the same question. Because seizing from what Martin said, I think Martin, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said that there are some member states who have something like this as a first step before people from third countries go in. But here we are talking also about first entry countries who have not other EU member states on their borders. Now we have a third party states, and one of them is pretty unpredictable. So, and I won't name which one, because I'm sure that you'll understand. So, Mr. Mayer, I would start from you on this. Do you think that these transit zones could work? Do you, I think you understand that there are some certain legal issues that need to be solved. Do you think that this is a workable solution?
Certainly, firstly, I'm totally aware of the fact that there are not only a lot of legal questions which have to be answered properly with regard to this idea of transit zones, but there are also practical questions. But I think that the Commission conducted very smartly by not being too precise with its proposal published on the 23rd of September, but leaving some room for clarification. Certainly, some members of the panel pointed out that there is a need for clarification within the next weeks or 2 months. But on the other hand, I'm deeply convinced if the proposal would have been more precise and more concrete, this I think would make it even more complex to find a consensus. So certainly, on the one hand, I have much understanding for these questions and for these long for more clarification, especially with regard to the transit zones. But on the other hand, I think it is a progress that at the first step, no EU member state, no government of one EU member state said it's the proposal of the EU Commission is no proper basis for the upcoming discussions, nor the Hungarian government, nor the government from Luxembourg. So I think this is a certain progress. With regard to the transit zones, we have it at our airports, like in Frankfurt or in Munich. certainly the numbers of persons who go to these transit zones is much lower than it would be expected at the Evros area, for instance. So certainly a lot of questions have to be answered, and a lot of topics have to be solved, not only with regard to the transit zone, but also with regard to the time frame of the pre-screening procedure. Certainly, I totally agree with everyone who pointed out that 5 days is very ambitious. Certainly, it's a very ambitious time frame. But on the other hand, I appreciate that the EU Commission makes now quite ambitious time limits and time frames. So, as I said, we are at the beginning of the negotiations and of the discussions. It's not clear if we come to a compromise. But on the other hand, as I said in the beginning, in my opening remark, I think the momentum never was so strong and so appropriate to find a consensus. If it's not possible to find a compromise within the next two months, I would perceive that it's not possible to find a consensus within the next years. So certainly all the questions have to be put on the table, but I think they can be answered. Certainly it's not easy with regard to the legal framework, under which the procedures are conducted in the transit zones. But I think we have a rather good chance now to come to a conclusion and to come to a compromise.
If I was to write a text in my newspaper, I would use your what you said about the 2 months to say Germany sets a 2 months deadline for the new migration pact. But as far as I don't have to write anything tomorrow, I will give the floor to George Koumoutsakos to give me his view on this very sensitive matter that we just discussed. Mr. Koumoutsakos, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to repeat the adjective that you just used, a very sensitive issue. Before asking the question whether a transit zone related to migration and asylum will be workable and effective, I would like to have, as I said before, a very clear idea on what is behind it and how we can have it. Because I have a difficulty in seeing a transit zone where, of course, the member states, at the end of the day, will have the responsibility, because you cannot have hundreds or thousands of people in a transit zone without somebody having the responsibility for their lives, for their daily needs. So even if we have this legal fiction of a transit zone on a member state territory, someone has to have the responsibility. And at the end of the day, it will be the member state, the frontline member state. I don't see who else could have the responsibility. Would it be you, the Commission? I have no answers in these questions. So, but in any case, I have a difficulty in seeing a transit zone created in an island like Chios or Kos or Lesbos. We're talking about limited territory. And then you have a transit zone in an island, a border island, just at the other side of Turkey. I see difficulty in having a transit zone in Evros. So we need a lot of clarification on this notion of the transit zones related to migration and asylum, because otherwise I will not be able to answer if this can work or not. First of all, we need to answer, is it feasible or not? And then we'll see if this can work and produce results. So this is my answer regarding the transit zones. I have a lot of question marks. As far as the extraterritorializing the asylum process, the asylum application process, of course, I have as well my doubts, strong doubts. First of all, because there is a fundamental prerequisite which is the consent of the third country. I really don't see Ankara or Tripoli or Cairo or you mentioned any capital of the countries surrounding Europe giving their consent for accepting hotspots, European hotspots in their territory. But I would say that I cannot exclude it if there are very strong incentives, financial or political, but still it remains an unknown zone. I don't believe that we are going to have the consent of the third countries. And second, there is a practical issue. In case we have this, even if there is a consent of a third country, then it will be a huge pull factor. Thousands of people will storm diplomatic representations or missions or the hotspots because it will be very easy for them to reach these hotspots or these offices or I don't know, whatever, in order to ask for asylum. So this will be a huge pull factor. This is why I see this idea that might sound interesting. This is why I see this idea as not feasible, at least for the time being and for the years to come. And finally, one issue regarding an argument that is circulating about relocation. There is an argument, a political argument, that if we have relocation among member states, this will be a huge pull factor. I'm afraid that this analysis is rather swallow. The pull factor is Europe itself. It is our success because we built a community of democratic states which are economically strong, prosperous. We are aging, we are peaceful, and we are democratic. This will always be a huge pull factor. Our own success in building this kind of Europe is the pull factor. Not the fact that we might relocate 50 persons there or 100 there. And I would say that this might be a push factor as well, because those people arriving or trying to pass through the European borders, they are not ready to go everywhere in Europe. There are tens of member states that are not countries where migrants or refugees want to go. They just want to go in 5 or 6 or 10, but they don't want to go to 27. So if you establish a relocation scheme, when somebody is coming from, let's say, Afghanistan, might end up to a country A, probably this will be a push factor because he does not want to go to this country. On the contrary, he does want to go to Germany. So if we have a fair share of relocation, this might, at the end of the day, become a push factor, not a pull factor. But as I said, the strategic pull factor for migration and refugees waves is Europe itself. The success that we had in building this kind of democratic, prosperous, and peaceful Europe.
Mr. Koumoutsakos, thank you so much. And thank you all for this very, very useful discussion. Unfortunately, we have to close. We've already passed 6:15, so Athens time. So I would like, first of all, to thank the two ministers, Mr. Meyer. It was great seeing you again, and thank you for your insights and inputs. Mr. Koumoutsakos, the same applies to you. And our four great analysts, Marie de Zomer, Ashley Okiai, Martin Wagner, and Angeliki Dimitriadi. I would also like to thank ELIAMEP and the Athens office of the Hanns-Seidel for giving me the opportunity to chair this meeting. And I understand that we will have time to discuss on the new pact, not only for the next couple of months, but well deep into the Portuguese presidency and probably the presidency after Portugal, which I don't remember now which one it is. So,
Slovenia.
Okay. So thank you so much. And we may have a same discussion like this maybe soon enough in the next couple of 3 months. Thank you all.
All the best to you. Best greetings to Athens.
Thank you, everybody.
Greetings to
Thank you.
Berlin.
Thank you.
Bye.